wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have this conversation with all of you. And it's an honor and delight to introduce our speaker today, who I'll be in conversation with, Rabbi Dr. Yitz Greenberg. In the words of Professor Steven T Katz, chair of the Elie Wiesel Center for Judaic Studies at Boston University, no Jewish thinker has had a greater impact on the American Jewish community in the last 2 decades than Rabbi Yitz Greenberg. Rabbi Dr. Irving Greenberg, known as Rav Yitz, is perhaps the leading Jewish scholar and theologian of our time. As author of many influential books on Jewish thought, ethics, and philosophy, Rav Yitz is the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership and past president of Jewish Life Network Steinhardt Foundation. Prior to these positions, he served as rabbi of the Riverdale Jewish Center, was an associate professor of history at Yeshiva University, and the founder, chairman, and professor in the Department of Judaic Studies of City College of the City University of New York. He received his Ph.D. from Harvard and received ordination from Yeshiva Beis Yosef. Rabbi Greenberg is a singular leader of contemporary American Judaism, having shown leadership on many vital Jewish communal initiatives spanning from the 1960s to the present. He served as chairman of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council and has written extensively on the complexity of post-Holocaust theology, as well as Jewish pluralism, with regard to the theology of Jewish-Christian relations and beyond. Now, a little bit about this book, The Triumph of Life. You say I have tags all over the place. The Triumph of Life is Rabbi Irving Greenberg's magnum opus, a narrative of the relationship between God and humanity as expressed in the Jewish journey through modernity, the Holocaust, the creation of Israel, and the birth of Judaism's next era. Rav Yitz describes Judaism's utopian vision of a world created by a God who loves life, who invites humans to live on the side of life, and who enables the forces of life to triumph over death. The Bible proclaims our mission of tikkun olam, preparing the world, such that every human image of God is sustained in the fullness of our dignity. To achieve this ideal, Judaism offers the method of covenant, a realistic, personal, incremental partnership between God and humanity across generations in which human beings grow ever more responsible for world repair. Rav Yitz calls on us to redirect humanity's unprecedented power in modernity to overcome poverty, oppression, inequality, sickness, and war. The work of covenant requires an ethic of power, one that advances life collaboratively and at a human pace, so that the Jewish people and all humanity can bring the world toward the triumph of life. So friends, if you did not buy this book yet, you will have the prize of now in the chat receiving a 40% discount code, where you can now order that with the 40% discount. If you did already buy it, then you receive the prize of a Head Start Yashikoa and Mazel Tov as well. It's also a delight, in addition to all of you being here, that we are partnering today with ASU Jewish Studies program on this program, and with some friends in Torat Chaim. So thank you for being here. It is a delight to be able to learn from my deepest and closest teacher and mentor and role model, Rav Yitz. So Rav Yitz, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my privilege.
So friends, I will be asking Rabbi Greenberg some questions about this book and thought. At times, I may even cut him off to fit even more questions in. Please know that that's not a sign of disrespect. It's an old Jewish tradition to cut each other off while you talk. But I do welcome you to post your questions in the chat if you have some questions to ask. They may be about the book and the theology. They may be about something happening in the world that you'd like to see how Rav Yitz might apply his thought towards that issue in the world. Alex, thank you for posting the link to the JPS published book and the discount code. If anybody wants that is now in the chat. So friends, The Triumph of Life, remarkable. If you have studied with Rav Yitz or read his books in the past, this is the culmination of this thinking over many decades, which is crucial to a post-Holocaust theology, crucial to a tikkun olam, a theology of repairing the world, crucial to interfaith relations, crucial to a vibrant Judaism that puts life at the front. So, Rav Yitz, to start, there's many approaches to repairing the world: progressive, conservative, Christian, Jewish, whatever it is. What is unique about this covenantal approach that you're putting forth towards repairing the world?
Let me start by saying I'll start with the repair the world first and then talk about what's the method that works, which is that whenever people are asked, what's Judaism's greatest contribution or to world civilization, I think the standing answer is ethical monotheism, the one God teaching. And I do feel it's an important contribution. But I would say influence number two, and in my judgment, maybe more widely accepted even than the first, is the Jewish idea of messianism, which I translate into tikkun olam, because tikkun olam is the modern Jewish theology catchword. But I think in this case it's true. Messianism simply means the Jewish tradition's insistence that the status quo of the world is not acceptable, that the world isn't good, it is repaired. It needs repair, and it needs to be improved. And the single central challenge of that is to make the world, this is the Jewish vision, perfect or paradise or completely supportive of life. That's the Jewish vision. That's what Messianism is about, to overcome all the enemies of life. The enemies of life are poverty and hunger and discrimination, oppression, sickness, war. And if you look, each of these enemies will be overcome, at least according to the Jewish prophet's vision. And again, to come a step further in that direction, this overcoming is not just spiritual, and it's not, Christianity started out with the same messianic vision, but in the Middle Ages and somewhat in Judaism too, was switched to more spiritual. I insist, and the Torah insists, the prophets insist, we're not just talking spiritual perfection. We're talking overcoming the physical ills, the oppression and the war and the sickness in this world. So I start with that. Now, here's the catch. So Judaism had this tremendous influence because this idea was taken over by Christianity, by Islam, and by modernity, which is a culture that is now sweeping the world, or at least has reached 2 or 3 billion people, followers. The question is, and this is the unique thing about Judaism, it marries a universal, revolutionary, total transformation vision with method called covenant, which is a partnership between God and humanity. Jewish people is a kind of a particular, sometimes I say, a lead partner or a managing partner, but it's the whole humanity, not just the Jewish people. It's a partnership between humanity and God and between the generations, because it can't be accomplished in one generation. Now, what's unique about covenantal? It's almost the opposite in spirit. It's particular, not universal. It's personal, not collective. It's particular, incremental, step by step, rather than total transformation. But here's the uniqueness of it. So the vision is totally transformative, but it says the way to get there is step by step, that you want to totally repair the world, but in the process, you don't want to bypass the human. So the process of perfection is on a human scale. Start local, start with your own family, start with one country. This is the particular and the human dimension. And what's more, the covenant says you can't coerce and force the other side. It's a partnership. You have to persuade. And yes, you know what that means? If you can't use force, you may have to compromise. It will take slower, and that's not a small price to overcome the evils. But in the long run, if you respect humans, you will overcome with much less suffering and much less oppression. And here's my punchline. In the last 200 years, the idea of total transformation, tikkun olam, has swept the world. But if you look carefully, the leading movements for revolution, for total transformation, turned totalitarian, they turned authoritarian, they turned destructive of human behavior. I'm speaking now of communism, Marxism, Stalinism, Nazism. People forget that Nazism started as a world transformation religion, way of life, meaning national, rather socialism, to overcome economic evils. Genetics, they said eugenics, they were going to get rid of human disabled in order to perfect the race. And at the same time, national, not like the Bolsheviks, they were going to have a unified national socialism, not a war, labor versus capital socialism. So all these, and not just in Europe, how about Maoism in China? How about the Khmer Rouge? All these movements which sought to perfect the world, in a sense, the means destroyed the ends. The means said, humans are the problem. Instead of saving the humans, they said, why are you holding this up? Or they said, as Mao said, rich peasants, it's their fault that China is unequal. So you kill 40 million rich peasants. Or in step by step, my point is that the method, by glorifying the ideal and by overruling the human need, the need for humans to go slower, the need for humans to compromise, the need for humans to adjust, ended up becoming the enemy of the very cause they stood for. In fact, they caused more pain, more destruction, more oppression than the evils they came to overthrow. So my point of the covenant is that Judaism has this major contribution to make to the world, because the world has accepted monotheism, or at least billions have. The world has accepted the idea of repair of the world, billions have. But the world has not fully understood the essential nature of covenant, which is a partnership humanly respecting, rejecting coercion, and allowing for the human limitations in change. And that, I think, is the teaching that we now have to share with the rest of the world.
Beautiful, beautiful. What remarkable beginning. And friends, I want to highlight just a few points that Rav Yitz shared there about why this is unique in contrast to many other approaches to Tikkun Olam we may hear. Just 5 points to highlight quickly that Rav Yitz just said. One, starting with the particular rather than the universal. Number two, incrementalism, right? Slow change, working at a certain pace. Number three, starting local. Number four, human effort. This is not just God as savior, but a partnership. And number five, being cautious with our ideals, where we don't plow over human life in the name of our ideals. We don't use force or coercion to get to these ideals. Many other things Rav Yitz said, and each of those gets about 10 to 20 pages in the book to understand those concepts. But friends, part of what the opportunity is today is that some ideas have been hijacked, and we can't give up on those ideas and ideals because of their distortions. For example, many people want to throw out universalism, the whole idea of repairing the world, because it's distorted by communism, it's distorted by Nazism, it's distorted by religious traditions that want to proselytize in the name of universalism. But universalism is so central to the Jewish messianic ideal, which leads to the second, messianism. Many people want to throw out messianism because religious fundamentalists have kind of hijacked it towards a certain agenda. But actually, messianism also holds a certain crucial part in the Jewish theological approach to repairing the world. So, Rav Yitz, now that Tisha B'Av is over, we're now looking towards the high holidays. And in the high holidays, many of us pray to the Melech Chafetz B'Chaim, the Melech Chafetz B'Chaim, the God, the King who loves life. Loves life. Why does God love life so much? What's so important about life? Why not a God who primarily loves justice or loves truth or loves holiness or loves love as the most central, right? The triumph of life. Why do we engage with a God who loves life as so primary?
That's a good question. Let's discuss it with God now and find it. So again, any answer I could give, I want to say again, the book, of course, is after the fact of accepting the world as it is, the tradition as it is, and trying to move from there. And the bottom line is that the tradition, as I found in many of these sources, has this great theme of the supremacy of life. So it's not just that God loves life, it's that life is the supreme value. For example, again, as you know, 610 of the 613 commandments are overruled if necessary in order to save a life. And one of the important theses of the book that I'd like to stress again and again is we're not just talking repair of the whole world long term, which is, of course, our goal, but it says you, individual, living at this time in this generation, you can live on this, you not only can, you should live on the side of life. What does it mean on the side of life? That means every act of life has this potential. In the book, I argue, this is Maimonides' insight. Maimonides writes, points out it's a verse in the Bible. Moses summarizing at the end of the Torah what he's been teaching, really near the end of Devarim, at the end of the 5 books of Moses. He says, let me summarize it for you. Re'ei nasati lefanecha hayom, behold, today, you know what I have put before you in this whole Torah? Et hachayim et tov, life and good, et hamavet et hara, evil and bad, death and bad, evil. Uvacharto b'chayim, you should choose life. Now, Maimonides says, if you look carefully at that verse, what is he saying? What he's saying is that good and life are synonyms. They are in apposition together. Or to put it another way, every good act is a choice of life, is an increase in life, is a respect or an upgrade for the quality of life. And every sin, every bad behavior is some element of choosing death, of degrading life, of reducing the quality and the dignity of life. So one of the most important claims in the book, in my judgment, I argue that all the rituals and all the ethics that we live now, even though they're compromised, they're not perfect, they're not perfect messianism. What it is an attempt to get you to look, restudy, reshape every life behavior, eating, talking, driving, you name it, doing your work, and so on. Each of these, study them. Just don't do it automatically, and see how you can maximize the life quotient and minimize the death quotient. So, for example, again, we all, in Kashrut, a book that Shmuly edited, I have an article on in Kashrut. The Kashrut is really not about, everybody's sort of aware of sort of the ritual dimension. Kashrut is really vegetarianism. The Torah says in the Garden of Eden and in the Messianic age, we will all be vegetarians. In fact, Isaiah argues in the Messianic age, even lions and wolves will lie down with the lamb because they will become vegetarian. Meaning, what? It means in the ideal world, you would not live by killing. If you don't eat, you would die. So it's a legitimate attitude and action. But in an ideal world, you wouldn't live by killing another living organism. So Kashrut says, ideally, be a vegetarian. All vegetables, all minerals are kosher. The restrictions start with eating meat. Now, the Torah says, realistically, God gives permission to eat meat. The human ability to eat meat was an important upgrade in the human diet that enabled humans to become more powerful, more vital, more healthy. But that is not the ideal. That's a temporary compromise. And therefore, meat eating is restricted in many ways. And the more the meat is a higher animal, a life, the more restricted it is. In short, what it says is that when you eat, you should try to minimize death. Even the kosher meat that you're allowed to eat, shechita is meant to, the animal should not suffer. The animal should be swiftly and painlessly killed. In other words, minimize death even when you are eating, minimize and maximize life. But that goes to, how about speaking? I can speak a word to the next word I speak to you could be a word of encouragement, a word of life, a word of learning and stretching your mind, making you more capable of better practices, better eating. Or the next word I say can be degrading. It can be a stereotype. It can be a hate word. So what the covenant says is that literally every action of life should be studied and reshaped to maximize life. Now, so that's my main contribution, I feel, in the book, maybe. Having said that, Shmuly says, but why? Why does God glorify or tell us to live on the side of life? How about justice? Isn't that more important? So my first answer is, as I said, I'm right. I'm speaking after the fact. God didn't ask my opinion. And the tradition does prioritize life first. My second answer to this comment, however, is maybe it's like we. Namely, why do I love life? Well, I take a little baby. They're so interesting. Unlike metal, never changes, never speaks. Living things, they gurgle, they move, they do cute things, they catch your attention. They reciprocate your emotions. They reciprocate your love. And they grow and they transform. So part of the answer is just plain love. God loves life because God loves. And if you open yourself to life, particularly human life, you will love it also. It's just very exciting and very emotionally fulfilling and very entertaining, very challenging. Yes, sometimes very aggravating and very, very difficult, but that's part of what makes it so fascinating. So my second answer is the priority of life is because life has evoked that love and priority by being so interesting and so transformative in its own self. I guess if I had to throw in a third answer, my answer, of course, is that at the end,
right,
justice and these things, again, go back to the question of respect for life. Why do you get justice? Because you're equal, you should be treated fairly and justly. So that's an expression of the dignity of life, equality, and so on. So I would argue that those things are not neglected by the priority of life. In a way, they follow from the priority of life.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you so much. Friends, if you're on the live stream, you can feel free to post your chats on the Facebook live stream, your questions on the Facebook live stream, and we'll get them there. Otherwise, you can continue to put them in the chat here. I'm going to answer just one of Steve's questions in the chat, just because as a close student and reader of Rav Yitz, I can answer that quickly. Does the triumph of life prioritize quality or quantity of life? And in Rav Yitz's theology, it is both. It is not only the maximizing quantity of life, but also quality of life. He can certainly expand upon that later if he's interested. But just a quick answer there, and Steve will hopefully come to your other questions shortly.
Let me throw in a further comment, because it's an excellent question and an excellent answer on your part too. I want to apply it to a burning issue we're all living with today. First of all, and that of course is the issue of abortion. The issue of abortion has been put on the agenda as pro-life, as against pro-choice. I think that's a serious misreading of the situation. The real issue of abortion is quality or quantity. Those who oppose abortion totally are saying, once a life has been created and in formation, you can't stop it. In a sense, it says quantity comes before everything. And the more extreme version, which of course Judaism is very much against, even if the child will destroy the mother, you can't perform an abortion. So again, what you're really saying is that the quantity of life comes ahead of the quality, and this life will live much longer than the mother, so the mother will have to go. Judaism, the pro-abortion position, the correct version of that is, not that it's casual, and not that you do it instead of birth control or others. What it says is if this child to term will threaten and endanger the mother's life, or even the mother's quality of life. What if the child is so handicapped? What if the child is Tay-Sachs, which means not only will be born handicapped, but within 2 or 3 or 4 years will die slowly, destroying or torturing the mother who's not up to it, not just the mother, the father not up to it. In that case, what I'm saying is protecting the quality of life against the embryo is a legitimate judgment. So again, I'm not saying what the answer is, but rather that what it comes is the issue of making the choice or reconciling. Sometimes there's a conflict between quantity and quality. One other example, and I'll stop with that, which is Lashon Hara. Speaking. The great commandment of speaking is tell the truth. Nevertheless, you have a fascinating law in Jewish tradition. It has to do with the quality of life. What if I tell a truth about somebody and a bad thing about them that I know about them? What if I tell it publicly and I tell it to someone who has no need to know about it? Now, notice, has no need to know. If your daughter's about to marry this man and I know that he's a scoundrel and an abuser, then it's a mitzvah to tell you to save you from that. But what if total stranger who has no contact with this person, not going to have any contact, I go tell them? This is called Lashon Hara, speaking evil. Because why? Because this person has no need to know. So why am I telling him negative things about this person? The answer is I'm trying to degrade him. I'm trying to lower him. That's the role of stereotype. That's the word of anti-Semitic cliches. That's the role of racism, to put them down and to destroy the dignity. So that, even though it's the truth, is considered evil speech and a sin, because the quality of life is being damaged, even under the cover of the claim of telling the truth.
Beautiful. Friends, I want to pick up on one thing Rav Yitz said there. I think that there's a danger of the political assimilation in American Jewish life, where basically Jewish Democrats just sound the same as American Democrats, and Jewish Republicans just sound the same as American Republicans. One of the opportunities we have is to add nuance to the discourse uniquely. And I think one of the things Rav Yitz just did, it was, no, I'm pro-life, so I'm going to say it like this. I'm pro-choice, I'm going to say what everyone else says, right? But actually, how can we add a new layer, to the conversation, and a new framing even, as opposed to just screaming? And my personal view is that our political discourse in America has proven far too contentious to lead to any type of larger societal transformation. If we want a societal transformation, it's going to have to be much deeper than the current political discourse we're witnessing on both sides. And I think the reframing of issues with a deeper moral and theological language is a great opportunity we have to add to this. So, to contribute at this moment. So, thank you for that. Now, two of your commitments that can clash at times are a commitment to pluralism and a commitment to life affirmation. And I wonder, does our commitment to pluralism get weakened when the other faith or other faith denomination doesn't hold life affirmation as central or even prominent in their values and legal system? Whether we're dealing with another monotheistic faith or Abrahamic faith, whether we're dealing with a different denomination within Judaism, how do we both hold this the commitment to multiplicity of truth, while also defending this ultimate truth of life affirmation?
So again, to me, I would defend it by trying to explain what pluralism really is. Pluralism does not mean that the other side is perfect truth or absolutely correct. What pluralism grows out of is two, I mean, there are many more issues, I won't go into it now, but the two main driving forces. One of them is my belief in teaching, drawn, of course, on the tradition, that being an image in the God, that's every human being is born in the image of God, means that they are born, all humans are born with three fundamental dignities: infinite value, their life is worth more than any amount of money, and no amount of money is too much for society or individual to spend to save a life. And secondly, equality. Every human being in the image of God is equal. God is not white or black. God is not male or female. God is not Jew or Gentile. And therefore, we are all various images of God, but we are by definition equal to each other, and not least uniqueness. Unlike human images, when you make one stamp or you make one coin from the one mold, it comes out identical. Whereas the Mishnah stresses, the Torah stresses, that each human being, we're all born from one couple, whether it be Adam and Eve or the African Adam and Eve of the source of Homo sapiens, whatever you want to call it. We all come from one couple, and yet not one image is the same as another. That uniqueness is the mark of God, the image of God. Now, if you come back to that, my point about pluralism is, if you speak, you are a human being in the image. You could be anybody, totally different religion, totally different culture, totally different civilization, totally different in every way. And yet you speak as a creature of infinite value, equal to me and unique. And that's important for me to listen to understand what uniquely you are saying that I am or somebody else is not saying. Well, so pluralism is based on a simple thought. If a creature of infinite value, equal to me and unique, speaks, at the least I owe them to listen, not to try to suppress them. They're valuable, not to suppress them because they're as equal to me. Who am I to suppress them? So pluralism is simply based on the fact that a human being is speaking on the other side of a different religion, a different way of life, a different value system. So at the least, they are entitled to speak, and I have the obligation to listen. Now, listen, if I do listen, it turns out this person is a Nazi, and this person is preaching mass murder, or this person is preaching cruelty. My answer is, of course, I have rejected it. So pluralism, but even there, until I see that, they have the right to speak because they are human beings in the image of God. So my answer, and the second answer, pluralism grows. That's the affirmation of the speaker of the other side. The second dimension of pluralism is, of course, limitations. Even if I have the truth, even if my tradition is revealed by God, I recognize the limitations. We don't have all the truth. Even in the truth that we have, we may have mistaken or flaws or misjudgments or mishearings of God's word. And so pluralism grows out of the recognition that no matter how good my faith and belief is, there's room and there's a need for other viewpoints and other approaches to fulfill mine. Now, neither of those two is changed if the religion or the way of life you're talking about doesn't give primacy to life affirmation. So if I may disagree with them, and I may in fact say to them, look, I'll try to persuade you that life is indeed the highest value and the primacy of life in every action is essential. But I certainly have no right, and I can't disrespect you. Suppose your religion chose justice, or your religion chose whatever, worship of God. I may disagree, but it doesn't change my respect for your right to speak and to teach this way, and recognition that I don't possess the whole truth. So my answer is, when I come across a religion that doesn't give the priority to life, I do my best to listen and to hear, and then say, here's something I'd like to offer to you. I think it'll strengthen or improve. I'll give you one kind of personal experience example. I was with a group of rabbis that met with the Dalai Lama in 1991. He was struggling. Of course, he had fled China, was in exile, and he was looking to the secret of how do you survive in exile indefinitely. And of course, he heard that the Jews have the secret, so he invited a group of Jews to come and talk to him. Now, as it turned out, when we met, and we got to talk a little bit, I realized that the truth is he's a Buddhist, but his Buddhism carries with it a certain I'm not sure what the word is, disrespect, or a certain demotion of world, of this life. In other words, this life is an illusion, and things that we spend all our time on, recognition, creativity, and work, and so on, he felt that we are carnal, we're too material, we're too physical, and the truly superior religion would be more spiritual and wouldn't place such emphasis on, on eating or on action for this world. So in a way, that was exactly the discovery. Now, again, he was an extraordinary person, and we came out of the whole experience with tremendous reverence for him, and I'm feeling we want to help these people who they're like early Zionists. We were in exile and they wanted help to get out of exile. So nevertheless, it was interesting to me. So I told him, I tried to explain to him why I think this life and the body And the actions of the body are relevant, and they're not secondary. They're not to be dismissed as illusions. And by the way, one of the challenges and problems of Buddhism as a result of this attitude is it had much less movements of world repair. It had much less social justice movements, because in a way this was a waste of time, or at least it was getting agitated about what they consider to be less important kind of experiences. So I try to explain this to him. I must say, I don't think I convinced him. And I think he still felt Judaism somehow was inferior by emphasizing this life and this world. So that what saved the occasion was a day or so after I presented, Zalman Schachter Shalomi of blessed memory presented. And he came into the meeting and he started talking about angels and about the metaphysics of angels and of the Kabbalah. Well, the Dalai Lama was transported. He was enchanted. He was the two of them went off on an angel and metaphysical journey. That was just, it was too bad that we were there to be nudgniks and try to pull them back to the real world. So I say again, it's one of those ironies. But I felt from this experience, he did, and we learned also to sort of respect something that really disagrees and doesn't have the same priority of life.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let me move to one of the most contentious issues, the one that's sensitive to all of us, and I'm sure each of us disagrees upon, as it relates to the current war, as it relates to the current election. You're obviously sitting in your home office in Jerusalem. There's other folks here who are in Israel and many around the world on the live stream and in the Zoom. And there's a few different questions all over the place I'm going to throw, and you can kind of pick up wherever you'd like. One from the chat says, do you believe this philosophy about loving life will impact a new reality in the Middle East? Someone might say, wait a minute, the Jews love life? What are you talking about? Like tens of thousands of people killed in Gaza. What do you mean the Jews love life? Like finally the Jews get power? And is this not an abuse of our power that this is what's done? And people see the bombing of schools and civilians. The perception globally is Jews don't value life. Jews finally get power and sovereignty. And according to many, we are reckless with how.
Let me start to answer until Shmuly unfreezes. The truth is that taking power is all about the primacy of life. The Jewish people lived through the Holocaust less than a century ago. The Holocaust was the assault of death on life, a total commitment to wipe out the Jewish people.
Did you hear?
Okay, you're back for sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
It was an assault of death on life, and it turned out that because the Jews were powerless, because the Jews had no ability, no country to give them haven, no army to defend them, no ability to stop them, they were really wiped out. And the truth is not just so everybody learned, and by the way, not just Jews, that in this world that we live in, there's such power available, and it's available to evil people, as the Nazis took all that modern technology and power and turned it into destruction of Jews, that there's no choice. If you believe in life, you have to take power to protect. And if you're a vulnerable population, you have to take power yourself to protect yourself. And I want to point out, it wasn't just the Jews who woke up. The Jewish people was not in its majority Zionist before World War II. The majority turned Zionist after the reality of realizing that without power, without a government, without a country, Jews would have no haven and no way of protecting themselves. But it wasn't just the Jews. Since World War II, we've had women's liberation. We've had African American and Black liberation. We've anti-colonial liberation. We've had gay liberation. Why? Because all of these groups realize the same truth from the same experience, that if you are vulnerable and weak then you can be destroyed. And if you are a vulnerable population, you must develop enough power to protect yourself. And again, this is what they learned. You can't just depend on the goodwill of other people. The fact is that ideals and liberalism and so on, the Allies, Democratic did not, in fact, protect the Jews. So this is the first lesson. So the answer is taking power is inescapable. Now, it's also true that when you take power, power by its very nature corrupts, and power can lead to abuse of other people's lives. But I must say, for 75 years now, Israel, it's not perfect, has taken that power and used it for life. And the Israeli army has, more than any army in the world, made a major effort to reduce or avoid civilian casualties. And even the Gaza war, I must say, I'll take a moment on that. The truth is, there's been and it should be heartbreaking, don't get this as a defense. It is heartbreaking to know that the Jews, in this case, Israel, has no choice but to go to war, because Hamas made very clear that in their charter is a commitment to obliterate the state. In fact, in their charter is the dream taken from the Hadith of wiping out every Jew in the world, and that therefore this is a cult of death, in my judgment. And therefore, you have no choice but to go to war and fight it. Now, when you go to war for fight, Israel has done the same thing as in the past. Only target civilians, try to do everything to reduce those deaths, including scratching missions when there's too many civilians at risk, including using new munitions that scatter less. And so if you kill or hit a military target, it will not spread and kill the nearby civilian target. Now, why are the numbers so high, therefore? So my first answer is, if you analyze the numbers of 39,000 claimed by the Hamas health ministry, first of all, and you may have seen the article, they can account for 10,000 less with actual deaths. So even this number is to be taken with a grain of salt, may well be 10,000 less. And certainly now that's been shown that their claim that is 70% women and children is false. The women and children are maximum of 8,000 in that 39,000, which is what you would expect from collateral as against direct targets. That's number one. And number two is, this is more important. If you separate out Hamas fighters, we're talking 15, 16,000 of the 39,000 are in fact fighters, terrorists, for whom killing is not only the only way to save them from killing again, and they've said they want to kill again. But if you separate out 15 or 16,000 out of 39, it's 16 to 23,000. Even at that exaggerated level, it means a ratio of one fighter for every 1.4 or 5 civilians. Well, history shows that that is an incredibly low ratio, showing a tremendous effort to save civilians. Why? In the Afghanistan war, the Allies made a decision to reduce civilian casualties because they were fighting to get the loyalty of the civilians against the Taliban. They made an all-out effort. They brought it down to 3 or 4 civilians for every fighter killed. So Israel, in fact, despite the high numbers, is killing less civilians per fighter than any army in history. Now, having said that, so why are the numbers up? The main reason, and again, it's scandalous that the world is knowing, is that Hamas has placed its soldiers and its command centers in hospitals, tunnels in private homes, its soldiers in mosques and schools. In short, it has deliberately turned civilians into human shields, and by international law and by moral self-defense. If they use a civilian setting to fight, then it's no longer shielded by the law of warfare, but has a right to fire back. Despite that, as I say, Israel does not attack certain places precisely because there are too many civilians. So my point is not that there's no abuse or no problem, and at the least even if it's justified, it should be heartbreaking for every Jew, caring Jew, every committed Israeli to Israel Jew, that so many Palestinians are dying. But that will stop only when the world joins in pressuring Hamas and pressuring Islamic Jihad to stop using the civilians, stop placing, and you all know that the Supreme Security Council refused to pass a resolution condemning Hamas, because again, it's a kind of a very skewed moral judgment here. And to me, it is amazing and shocking how many of the supporters of Hamas worldwide have justified and defended the massacre, or defended rape, or defended torture, abuse. So my answer, come back to your main question, is that it's not over. And yes, it is heartbreaking, the deaths. And finally, it's certainly worrisome, deeply troubling, that you have people like Ben Gvir or Smotrich in the Israeli government who in fact want to kill more civilians and who are complaining that there should be more. They're the ones who objected to humanitarian aid. They're the ones who have tried to frustrate or condemn hostage deals. So again, the main point being, I don't think this changes the reality we all have, that in this world, if you're not willing to take power, and yes, if you take power, there will be innocent victims. But if you are pure and refuse to take power, and you'll never kill any civilian, you will justify and allow the killing of millions of innocent people by the terrorists. So we live in this very troublesome but true reality that you have to take power, with the power for the sake of life. With that comes the loss of innocence and the inescapable killing. So the moral army and a moral people is one that does its best to reduce and minimize these casualties. A moral army is one that does not gloat or glorify in its killing or its successful. And this is where I think we are.
So Rav Yitz, to stay on this topic for a moment, thank you so much. To try to understand the Biden administration hostage deal from the perspective of triumph of life. On the one hand, one might say we should encourage the prime minister to accept this now, because Pidyon Shavuyim is so important, bringing home the hostages now, that is, and because every hostage is infinite value of life, and stopping the war now, because this will save lives for Jews and for people of Gaza. And on the other perspective, no, we should not stop this war now, because Hamas cannot be left in leadership, and there's still tunnels in place that haven't been closed up, and the numbers of life that will be saved will be even greater. By preventing future war and the like. How, in just to take this particular moment, how might you think of a life affirmation approach in terms of whether we should support such a hostage deal that ends the war versus continuing to support, this being carried out?
It's really, again, we live in a time, there are no easy answers. You're really pointing to the problem of the conflict of two moral issues and needs. We'll come back to that. We'll talk about American politics because that's the same issue. But let's take this one first. When you have this kind of attention, let's be honest about it. The reverence for life, the willingness to stop the war, the willingness to release hundreds or thousands of terrorists and murderers in order to save these lives that are left of the hostages. The answer is that's our quote unquote weakness. In my judgment, it's our strength, because we treat life as infinitely valuable. And yes, we end up paying an irresponsible, or at least I should say, an incredibly difficult price to save those hostages. But it's a weakness, and they take advantage of it. Again, my answer is I blame the world, which not only tolerates it, it treats Hamas. The New York Times, I was talking about major newspapers with major contributions to keeping the world honest and truthful, but have systematically degraded Israel and tried to show that the Gaza war is totally terrible and Hamas is not a problem. or as if Hamas is not truly a threat of death to all Israelis and to many people beyond Israel. So this is it's a real problem. So because they're not condemned, because they're not shown up for what they're doing, because again, the UN allowed UNRWA to be taken over for command and control centers, or when Israel went into the Shifa hospital because it turned out there was a command and control center for Hamas. Again, it was condemned. You're invading a hospital. They would, instead of recognizing the truth of what was being abused here, they kind of made it look like Israel is wrong and Hamas is innocent. So my answer in part is that the evil, the fallout, is to be blamed on Hamas. In this case, the minimum self-defense cannot be helped. But yes, the price of vulnerability, the price of not being able to finish the war, it's a very high price. But we're trying to do that because we're trying to save the few lives that are left. I will say long term, in my judgment, I hope that the ceasefire will nevertheless leave Hamas so weakened that in fact there is room for, again, I'm not a fan of Netanyahu and the present government. In my judgment, there is room to negotiate for a two-state solution. It would involve a major transformation on the part of the Palestinians and the authority, which in my judgment have not adequately renounced the idea of destroying Israel themselves. I want to remind you that Israel offered a Palestinian state 95% of the West Bank and offsetting territory for the 5% difference in 2000 and 2009, and they were turned down because tragically the Palestinians were they would have to accept Israel, and they are more determined to destroy Israel than they are to set up their own state, which is, by the way, what happened with all the Arab states, not the Palestinians, in 1948 when they could have had an Arab state. But instead of setting it up, they tried to invade and destroy Israel. And in 1967, when Israel offered to negotiate, again, they refused to do it. And in 48 to 67, when they controlled the West Bank, they did not set up a Palestinian state. They spent all their energy trying to boycott, destroy, undermine Israel. So my answer, to come back to the main point, is that we still have this challenge of the primacy of life, but after the fact, meaning we have no choice but to fight. And what will happen after the ceasefire, or what will happen in future years? And my answer is that if we have to fight again, we will fight again. And again, it's heartbreaking and tragic. And keep in mind, it's heartbreaking and tragic on both sides. Think of the Israeli people, parents, who have recognized that in order to defend themselves, this is what October 7th shattered. They thought Hamas is trying to shift from killing to governing. They try to think that they can be contained. They now realize that at the present situation, there'll be a war in every generation, and children will be, Jewish children, will go to war, will be sacrificed, and will die, will be wounded badly. But they are prepared to pay that price for the right to be free, for the right to have our own country and our own dignity and our own values. So we live in that tension. No question about it. We live in that tension, and we live in the tension of, can you do justice to the Palestinians without risking the very existence of Israel? And I must say, 30, 60 years ago, 80% of Israelis were open to a Jewish and Palestinian state side by side. I would say, honestly, if I talk to people now, I would guess it's maybe 20%. But again, what made the change? Some of it is the settlement and the movement to the West Bank. But the major part of the change is that more and more Israelis became convinced that the Palestinians, if they had their own state, would just be more effective in destroying and undermining Israel. And that's what happened in Gaza. They had their own state, and that's what they did. So we live with that tension. Can you try to do justice to the Palestinian nationalism? I think the answer is yes, but it would take not just the flexibility on the Israeli government side, but more important, a major transformation and effort to democratize the Palestinians, to build their economy instead of spending their energy trying to undermine Israel.
Thank you, Rav Yitz. We want to honor your time, and so I want to give you just the opportunity to offer closing remarks about the book, whatever you'd like to share. And maybe the question I would ask as a prompt is, in 30 years from now, God willing, you'll live to 120 in good health and joy. In 30 years from now, when you assess the success of the book and of the theology, what would look different if the triumph of life is kind of wins educationally, pedagogically? What do you hope that the Jewish world and the world at large might look like?
Well, let me just say the main point, my point of view, the main point, there are many different points in the book, so I shouldn't say main point, but one of the central points of the book is the belief that there are stages of the covenant. The God giving the covenant, the partnership of the Jewish people in the biblical, takes much more control, much more decision, sends prophets to give direct instructions what people should do. The rabbinic tradition says that God self-limited again and now wants humans to take more responsibility. The book argues we're living in the third stage when God wants humans to take full responsibility. Now, don't get me wrong. God has not abandoned us, nor is this a statement of what some people call Hester Punim, hiding God's face. It's the opposite. God comes closer. God shares our experience. God stands with us in our suffering. God stands with us in our joy. God goes through the same hell of the hostages in the tunnel. God lived through the suffering and the gassing and the terrible torture of the European Jewry. But God says human beings take full responsibility. That means we have to take power, but then use it, direct it in the highest, most moral way. So yes, this book is more than anything else to me a narrative of how humanity starting, but maybe as a moral model or as a light to the nations, the Jewish people takes power, but uses it for the primacy of life. Uses it, yes, to overcome poverty. That's a major contribution. To overcome hunger. How about the Israel's leadership, world leadership in irrigation and drip irrigation, saving water, transforming water, whether the water shortage are all over the world, and improving agriculture. So I would say my dream would be that the Jewish people understands this narrative and steps up and takes responsibility. In this narrative, when they take responsibility, instead of assimilating, as you pointed out earlier, they, in a distinctive way as Jews, can make an active contribution, not just in Israel, but in America and everywhere, bringing those Jewish values. So my dream is the Jewish people takes this narrative, that this narrative influences Gentiles and all those who learn from Jews, and the narrative leads us to harness all this incredible power for life, for dignity, for equality, for helping the vulnerable. I mean, Shmuly, I hope it doesn't sound like a counterplug, but to me, you're a model of what a religious Jew should be doing, which is to say, using the energy, the persuasive power, the leadership quality to reach out to the vulnerable, to stand by the side of those who seek asylum, to stand by the side of those who are neglected by society and abused many times. So this is, to me, the dream, that this narrative would have the Jewish people doing what I think the prophets dreamt all along, serving as a model. It's a pluralist model. We're not the only model. And it's a pluralist model. We don't have all the perfection, and we don't have all the points, and we don't have perfect behavior either. But in our own limited way, making this contribution. Israel is a model of how you take people from Ethiopia from the 16th century or 17th century and bring them to full dignity. Yes, that model struggles with problems of racism and discrimination, but it achieved most of that. How you take people from Arab countries and give them full dignity, full equality, and how the culture opens up from being dominant Ashkenazi to pluralist and respectful of Sephardi. This is all the process that I hope the whole world will find and learn from us. And I hope this book will play a role in stressing that the Jewish religion, we have rabbis who use the religion to justify murder, who are talking about Amalek, treating the Arabs as people that have a right to kill the children, as the Torah speaks of Amalek. I'm pointing them to the other source of the tradition. God, the loving, forgiving, enabling God who loves and forgives everybody and who wants to save the whole world. So I hope that this book will help people understand those values and live them and teach them to others.
Thank you so much, Rav Yitz, for the gift of this time for us to spend with you. Thank you for the gift of this wonderful book, The Triumph of Life, a Narrative Theology of Judaism, which I hope, friends, you will pick up and we can discuss together. And if you read this and want to discuss it, I would love to do that with you. I'm sorry for the many questions we did not get to, but we hope to have many more times to learn together with Rav Yitz as well. Many blessings to everyone for a safe, healthy day. God bless.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.